All right, guys, Matthew chapter 10. We're moving right along. So this is, what part are we? I don't remember what part of the series we're on, but this is Matthew chapter 10. This is where Jesus calls and sends out his 12 apostles. Remember, Matthew is not in order. So some of these events took place before the Sermon on the Mount, actually. But I just want to talk about the 12 apostles for a little bit and their ministry and Jesus' commissioning of them. So here we are. Let's open God's Word, and let's hear what He would have us to say. This is Matthew chapter 10, starting in verse 1. And He called to Him His 12 disciples, and gave them authority over unclean spirits to cast them out, and to heal disease and every affliction. This word right here is our Greek of the week. Ladies and gentlemen, our Greek of the week is exousion. You see it over here on the right side of your screen, exousion. And it means authority. So Jesus calls his 12 disciples, his 12 apostles, and he gave them exousion over the unclean pneumaton, under the unclean spirits. See the PN right here, like pneuma, like pneumatic drill, the unclean spirits. And he gave them authority to heal. Therapeuin, like therapy, to heal basan, every disease and every affliction. And as you know, M-A-L, M-A-L, mu, alpha, lambda. M-A-L means bad in basically every language, right? So, when we look at this, and we look at the list he gives us of his 12 apostles, this list, it can be found in all four Gospels and in Acts. It's always the same list of the same 12 people, and it's mostly in the same order. Peter's always first, then Judas is always last. Now, several of his disciples all go by more than one name. So if you're reading Luke or John, they may have different names. Like Thaddeus, for example, may have a different name. Simon may be called Peter sometimes, because there's two Simons, Simon the Zealot and then Simon Peter, so it's easier to just call him Peter. Judas, the nickname for Judas is Jude, like one of Jesus' brothers was named Jude. There are several men in the New Testament named James. I just want to talk about three of them real quick. Two of them are of the 12. We have James the Apostle, the brother of John, traditionally called James the Greater. He is the one that's killed by Herod in Acts chapter 12. Then we have James the Apostle, the son of Alphaeus, sometimes called James the Lesser. And it's hard to tell when he's called James the Lesser in Mark 15. Does that mean like the shorter one? Like little James? Or like younger? Or what does that mean? We don't know. We have James, the half-brother of Jesus. He's the one that wrote the book of James in the Bible, and he was an early church leader in Jerusalem. So, the two Jameses mentioned here in Matthew 10 are not Jesus' brother who wrote the book of James. Just keep that in mind. A little side note for those of you caught up in a worldly idea of diversity. Everyone on planet Earth is fallen in Adam. So we all fall woefully short of the glory of God. We're all on equal footing there. Everyone who calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. That's true too. But the idea of diversity being that we have to have a quota of ethnicities or gender or whatever in every single thing we do is evil. And that's evil. And I'd like to point out for those Christians who believe that's a good thing, please note that Jesus' 12 apostles were all straight Jewish men. They were all the same ethnicity. They were all of the same sexual orientation. Guys, come on. You can't take worldly ideas and apply them to God. Otherwise, Jesus would not have been a very diverse person. Which he was, in the sense that diversity is a good thing, not what the world says it is. So here it is. Exousia is our Greek of the week. You can see that here. And it means the authority, the right to rule, control, or power. Used 102 times in the New Testament. We have another one. You might call it lame, but Jesus. Jesus. Hebrew Yeshua, but in Greek Jesus. That is Jesus. It means Savior or Yahweh saves. 917 times in the New Testament, as you might expect. So, God instructs his church how to handle spiritual warfare in 2 Corinthians 10 and Ephesians 6, and physical ailments in the church, James chapter 5. So he tells us in James chapter 5 to bring them before the elders, to have them anointed with oil, to pray for them. But Jesus gives special and unique authority to his 12 apostles to perform miraculous signs and wonders. This was to authenticate his ministry had begun, but also to authenticate the 12 apostles for who after he was ascended into heaven. In other words, there would be no question of who the leaders would be in the early church after Jesus left earth. He gave the apostles the ability to perform signs and wonders so it would authenticate their ministry in the writing of the New Testament. Think about the power struggle that would have ensued if Jesus never identified who the leaders were supposed to be after he left. How difficult would it have been to respect the authority of those Jesus merely said were leaders but never gave them the opportunity to exhibit that authority or leadership. Good leaders develop their successors, not simply choose them. Jesus is developing his apostles and giving them the opportunity to lead and demonstrate their authority while he's still on earth, not simply choose them and leave them to their own devices. Leaders out there, you should develop your replacement. The magnitude and prolific nature of the signs and wonders performed by the apostles should be seen as unique to them in the church age. 2 Corinthians 12:12. The signs, wonders of an apostle were performed among you. So when we look at Jesus' commission of them, this is their first mission trip. There are other mission trips, but this is their first mission trip. And he sends them out 2 by 2 in the different towns. And he also goes and preaches and teaches in those same towns. Keep a close eye on him. We don't know how long this mission trip lasted, this local mission trip, but it seems to have lasted a couple weeks when you read the other accounts, the parallel accounts in the Bible. It seemed to have lasted not super long, maybe a couple weeks, but we don't know for sure. And they were supposed to go to the lost sheep of the house of Israel. So this first mission trip was not for the whole world. This first mission trip was specifically for Jewish people, because God promised the gospel would first be revealed to them. That's what Romans 1:16 says. For I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ, for it's the power of God's salvation to all who believe, first to the Jew, then to the Gentile. It was always through you, all nations on the earth will be blessed. First to the Jew, also to the Gentile. Always that's how it's going to be. A few notes about the Old Covenant and the New Covenant that may help you. So a comparison, or maybe you should say a way of thinking of the Old Covenant and New Covenant and seeing their parallels. God chose a people to enter a covenant with. Israel in the Old Covenant, the elect in the New. God chose a mediator of that covenant between the groups. In the Old Covenant was Moses, and the New Covenant is Jesus. Not in the same way. God inaugurated both covenants with blood. In the Old Covenant was with animals, and the New Covenant is with Jesus. You can read about this in Hebrews chapter 9. God gave documents for each covenant through writers that he chose. The documents explain the covenants and how each side of the covenant, God and his people, would keep their end. Old Testament, New Testament. Then God gave principal writers and figures in those covenant documents the ability to perform various signs, wonders, and miracles to authenticate they were actually sent by God himself. Old Testament prophets, New Testament apostles. God would fulfill each covenant by his appearing on earth. The incarnation, fulfillment of the old. Christ's return, fulfillment of the new. Jesus gives instructions to the apostles not to acquire a bunch of money while they go out, to take nothing but what they have, to not go and acquire a bunch of new stuff, that whatever they need will be provided to them. They can take gifts, but they should not seek gifts from people when they go into houses. And if you note in verse 11, it says this: in whatever town or village you enter, find out who is worthy in it and stay there until you depart. As you enter the house, greet it. And if the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it's not worthy, let your peace return to it. And if anyone will not receive you or listen to your words, shake the dust from your feet when you leave that house or town. Truly I say to you, it will be more bearable on the day of judgment in the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than it will be for that town. The more revelation someone receives, the more responsible they are to respond to that revelation in submission to God. And verse 15 shows us a common theme with this. This necessarily implies that harsher judgments are in hell and greater rewards are in heaven. We've talked about this before. We don't know what those harsher judgments look like, but trying to imagine what is more severe than the baseline judgment of eternal hellfire and eternal darkness truly terrifies the soul. Verse 16, often quoted verse. I quote it all the time. Let me give you some practical application for verse 16. Excuse me. Okay, anyway. Um, some practical application for verse 16. Behold, I'm sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Notice 4 animals are mentioned here, and there's a reason Jesus chose these 4. We noted before when Jesus talked about wolves dressed in sheep's clothing, those false teachers. Our shepherd is sending his own sheep out, his own sheep out, whose chief predator is wolves, some of whom are actually dressed as sheep. Now, what I want to talk about is be as wise as a serpent and as innocent as doves is this. We are to, when possible, be at peace with all people. Snakes, for the most part, hide their strength, their ferocity, their venom. And it only comes out when they feel that they are in a situation where they actually have to use it. On the outside, they're as harmless as doves, but on the inside, they are as dangerous. They are very dangerous. We are to be wise as serpents, but as harmless as a dove. So, in other words, we are not to be naive in the world. We're to be kind, yes. We're to be gentle, yes, but not naive to the forces of darkness. So, on the outside, harmless as dove, but on the inside, we're also wise as serpents. That's what Jesus is telling his disciples here. Um, so this one-time mission lasted for a few days, maybe a little longer. But Jesus then, in verse 16 through 25, gives out more general advice and instruction to the whole future ministry of his apostles and how they will experience it when he's gone. So this short mission trip is good practice for a lifelong mission you're going to live. Let's look at a few things that Jesus advises his disciples on for their long-term ministry. First off, unbelievers will hate you and even convict you for living as a Christian. Verse 19, if you note, says, don't be anxious about how you speak or what you are to say, for it will be given to you in that hour. That's not an excuse not to prepare for witnessing, preaching, and teaching, but a promise of strength, endurance, and courage to God's children. I want to go back here to this side. I want to look at verse 19 together. Oh, verse 21. Here we go. Brother will deliver over brother. See, we've moved on from the short mission trip to the future after Jesus leaves. Brother, Adelphos, will deliver brother over to death. Father his child. Children will rise against parents and have them put to death. You'll be hated by all for my name's sake, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. The gospel divides. The gospel divides. The gospel is foolishness to those who are perishing, but it's God's power to those who are being saved. It divides. We should, when possible, live at peace with all men, but never compromise the gospel just to appease others. We don't have to be secret sensitive. We preach God's truth and trust it to do what will happen, to do what it's going to do, and it won't return void. It will either be light for salvation or just reason for judgment. All right, now check out verse 23. When they persecute you in one town, flee to the next. For truly I say to you, you will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. This verse has tripped up many people. Like, okay, what does this mean? They will not have gone through all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes. If the phrase Son of Man comes refers to his second coming, which I think it does, then what does it mean they will not have gone through all the towns of Israel? Israel's not that big. Well, I think the answer lies with this phrase, gone through. If you look over here in the Greek, the lesete, or sometimes tetelestai, and it means to have finished, for the design to have been finished. That's what that word means. Let's see if I can even get a little. Let's see if I can get fancy here. I might be able to. Yes, you see over there on the right, to finish, to complete, to perform, to carry out. You should see that over here on the right side of your screen. So you will not have finished with all the towns of Israel before the Son of Man comes, completed your work. In other words, if they persecute you in one town, don't sit there and purposely try to become a martyr. Flee to the next, because you will not have finished, converted, Christianized, gone through, and had everyone convert before I come back. In other words, you'll get another chance. Hey, since they persecute me, they'll be persecuting you too. Don't think like that. And if they called the master of the house Beelzebul, you remember that from before, they've already called him that, how much more will they malign those of his household? So have no fear of them, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. What I tell you in the dark, say in the light, and what you hear whispered, proclaim on the housetops. Don't fear those who can kill the body, but cannot kill the soul. Rather fear him who can destroy both body and soul in hell. Please note that God here is claiming sovereignty over body and soul, and he destroys it. I know sometimes we say things like, God doesn't send anyone to hell. Well, he does. He destroys both body and soul in hell. He doesn't do it with a smile on his face, but he does. And I love this passage. Are not two sparrows sold for a penny, and not one of them will fall to the ground, i.e., die, apart from your Father? But even the hairs on your head are all numbered. In other words, not like I know the number of hairs. They're all each individually numbered. Fear not, therefore, for you are more value than many sparrows. Love that passage. So everyone who acknowledges me before men, I'll acknowledge before my Father who's in heaven. And everyone who denies me before men, I will also deny before my Father who's in heaven. Again, the gospel divides. Jesus goes through this talking about how the gospel divides. But I think this part's key. Whoever receives you receives me, and whoever receives me receives him who sent me. This is clear in the Bible. Remember about how important it is to serve each other, guys? Not just listen to a sermon online, but actually serve each other. When Saul is persecuting Christians, Jesus asked him, Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me? When Jesus says, blessed are you to those in heaven, for when I was hungry, you gave me food, and when I was thirsty, you gave me drink, and they say, when did we do that? We weren't even alive when you were on earth. He says, if you've done it for each other, you've done it for me. The world will know you're my disciples by the way you love each other. That's how important Christian service to each other is. Whoever receives you is like receiving me. And I know I kind of went through that last part kind of fast, but I'd like you to dwell, please, on verses 29 through 33. Such a beautiful passage. Not one sparrow, two of them are sold for a penny, worth half a penny if you want to think of it in that terms, dies without your Father's consent. So don't fear, because we're worth more than many sparrows. God cares for all his creation, but humans above the rest. And if he cares for sparrows that much, a meaningless bird, how much more for me and you? That is Matthew chapter 10, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this is of some benefit to y'all. I enjoy doing it. I don't have anything fancy to offer. This is just my computer and my Bible in front of me and a little Accordance Bible software app. I don't have a fancy studio, but I really appreciate doing this, and I hope it's of some blessing to you. As always, like, share, subscribe. You can support our ministries at Witten Baptist Church through our Witten Baptist Church app. Anyway, Witten family, I love you very much, and until next time.